Hey there, welcome to the DFS Build NBA edition. I'm Kevin Roberts with Taylor Smith. We're getting ready to go over the nice 9-game main slate. Actually, it's 8 games now because the Bucks and Pelicans, they gone because it's bad weather there in New Orleans. So it is an 8-game slate. Pretty nice.
Is it?
Our goal, yeah, I mean, I think so.
I think it's 6 on DK.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7. Sorry. So without the Bucks game, it's 7 now. Unless my math is wrong.
6.
Gosh dang it. Oh my gosh. Okay, here we go. Anyways, aside from that, we tend to give pretty good advice. Okay. Aside from giving you the number of games for the day, our advice has been good. Honestly, if you join our Discord, we're giving out core plays leading up to lock from 5:30 to 6 p.m. Central. We are helping people out, giving them advice, looking at their lineups, and pushing out those core plays. So those have been doing really, really well. The projections are helping considerably, and we're picking out the right guys. And then you just have to go and pick out the right studs and ancillary pieces after that. So hopefully we can keep doing that, and you can keep winning. If you have won so far, please consider hitting the super thanks button below the video. And either way, if you like free advice, you can hit the like button on this video, subscribe to the channel, and then, by the way, come join our Discord. All of that is free. And you can join the Discord in the link below this video. But enough of that. Let's get to it. We break down the slate by going position by position, highlighting our favorite plays. So starting at point guard, SGA looks really good. 56-point fantasy projection. I believe it is now the best of the slate with no Giannis. Certainly you can make an argument for LaMelo Ball and Cade Cunningham, especially depending where ownership lies. But right now it is split. So how are you feeling about SGA, and how are you feeling about those other guys as pivots?
Yeah, point guard stacked. I think it's the best position on the slate. Center doesn't have a lot of expensive stuff. It's a pretty deep position, but point guard's where you want to spend money, I think. So SGA looks great at 10-5. J-Dub is out, he'll look better, but even Hartenstein and Chet being out alone is enough to make him a standout. Plus, the matchup against Utah is about as good as it gets. The only issue is the potential blowout. OKC is quite a bit better than Utah at basketball, so... But we've seen SGA in 3 quarters even get there, so no qualms with it. But there is a lot else to like. Like Cade Cunningham looks great again against Atlanta. No issue with that. Trae Young a little bit expensive, but if Jalen Johnson is out, he would get a slight boost. You have LaMelo, who's getting wildly expensive. Pace up spot against Memphis, but not really something I want to do. There are other Hornets on my radar. I think LaMelo's always a strong tournament play, but there's just a ton like Mitchell, Garland. I love Kyrie Irving on this slate. I think he's quite undervalued as of now. Anthony Edwards is point guard eligible once again on DK at 9-3. So really countless ways you can go. I think the top overall play for me is probably Booker. But I think the fact that you can play him at shooting guard makes him a little bit more appealing.
I'm a little interested in what SGA's ownership is going to be like, because obviously there is a significant gap between him and the next guy. And Utah, aside from Atlanta, I mean, it's like one of the best matchups you can get, certainly the best matchup on the board today. So what do you think? Because right now the ownership split. Do you have a lean as far as like where it's going to go? Do you think it's going to stay split, or do you think maybe we could get like an overlooked SGA here to close out the slate?
It might depend on the J-Dub news, which I think he's going to play. He was at shoot-around and stuff, but we don't know yet. I don't really think he's going to be super chalky, like maybe 20%, maybe a little bit less. It kind of depends on other news. I think this Cleveland stuff is going to attract a lot of ownership again, which might keep things relatively light for the super expensive ones. Like Garland should be chalky. Mitchell should be chalky. LeVert as a punt, if he plays, should be chalky. So a lot of ways to go. The spend ups, I don't think any of the spend ups are going to be overwhelmingly popular though.
All right, so speaking of those second tier options, I think Trae Young's price is still pretty good. The only issue is, like you said, Devin Booker, Kyrie Irving, they are a little bit cheaper and project about as well. Anthony Edwards also there at 9.3. So those guys all look good, Trae included. The nice thing about Trae is it doesn't look like he's going to be very owned. He absolutely smashed the last time he played the Pistons. What did he get here? Where is he? Oh, there he is. Yeah, 64 fantasy points, 35 real points. We know he's double threat. So I think Trae is kind of shaping up to be my favorite GPP play at point guard, just because I think he's he's not like as safe as like an SGA or Cade. But he's also a little bit more expensive than that next 4-pack of guys that look really, really good. So I think he's interesting. That said, SGA feels the most comfortable on this slate. It's Utah, all the extra usage, the projection's the best, and he's a comparable price to these other pricey point guard studs like Cade and LaMelo. I think if I have to pick one, it's going to be SGA here, and LaMelo is like the last of the three that I want. Obviously, the ceiling is massive, and Memphis is a good like DFS environment, but Memphis also can defend pretty well. So like, I don't think it's that great of a matchup. And by the way, there's several games here that are very, very dicey as far as blowout risk, like even more so than usual. So something to keep in mind as we go down here. Is there anybody in like the 7 to 8K range that really calls out to you?
Garland, like I said, the Cavs didn't really get there the other day, but kind of weird slate in general on MLK Day with afternoon games. Cleveland and Houston's not a good matchup, but without Mobley, there is extra usage to go around for these guys. So I think Mitchell and Garland are okay. Van Vliet, I guess you can play on the other side. He's always pretty decent with the minutes and all that, but not a priority. Yeah, like this Houston-Cleveland game should be competitive, but both teams are good defensively. It's not really something I'm dying to attack, but I think if you want to correlate those kind of guys together, it's okay enough.
Yeah, it kind of feels like that Cleveland OKC game the other day where like it had like a 131 total or something crazy. And then it was like a defensive slugfest, and OKC won very much so, just completely housing the Cavs. So I don't think it's going to necessarily go that route, but I do think that the high total is going to attract people there. And outside of Garland, I don't really want to do it that much. I think he's a good price. Like if you look at his relation to Ja or even his teammate there, Donovan Mitchell, he just looks like the better play there. You get $1,000 savings for a similar projection. So that might make him a chalky play, but right now it's not out of control at 18%. So that'd be fine. I'd be okay with eating that amount of chalk for sure. If it gets crazy where we're pushing like 30% Garland at 7.4K, I don't mind going up more and maybe going and just finding a way to get like a Kyrie or Devin in that same position. All right, so going down here, there are some values at point guard for sure. Tyus Jones could be even more appealing at 4.3K if Bradley Beal is out. I think he's okay either way, but obviously would feel a lot better about his minutes if Beal wasn't in. It would just make Tyus possibly chalk at 4.3K. Karis LeVert at 4K flat. He is in play for sure with the injuries to the Cavs. What's your interest level in the Nets here? We have Keon Johnson at point. Who else do they have strictly at the point that we can use? Because D'Lo's out. Ben Simmons is doubtful. Cam Johnson is doubtful. Any interest in the Nets, or you're trying to steer clear?
I don't love it. I think Keon's okay, but 5'7", like we're not getting a huge discount on that.
It's a little steep.
Should be okay, but I don't know. I don't feel like, I know they only have 9 guys. Phoenix isn't very good, but should still be a blowout. I do think the Tyus Jones thing is interesting because he's only 4-3. Brooklyn not feeling an NBA caliber roster at the moment. I agree. If Beal is out, he's a lot better. He'd be a core play for me in that scenario. But
yeah, probably.
Even if Beal plays, I think Tyus Jones is okay as value. LeVert, just because he's only 4K, should start if he plays in place of Evan Mobley, as we saw the other day. I kind of hope some better cheap value emerges. I know, but
he hasn't been good though. That's true.
Well, he's good per minute historically, and he's cheap.
Yeah.
So okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm in full agreement on the Tyus thing. I think right now he's fine, but not a core play as things stand. If Beal is out, it'd be tough. Something else really nice would have to open up to keep him out of my core for sure. No punts at point guard, I take it. No Keaton Wallace out there that we need to chase down.
I think you can consider like Ty Jerome again or Rob Dillingham. Dillingham at 3-1 without DiVincenzo playing a backup role. He's been quite good per minute in limited opportunities, but certainly not a safe play. He and Jerome both have essentially no floor.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to shooting guard, Devin Booker and Anthony Edwards and Kyrie Irving are all kind of the same play and in the same price range. I think I'm just going to let the ownership do the talking. If I'm only going to pick one, as things stand, that might make me prioritize Kyrie. If you want to look at projection alone, the guy you vouched for, when we first got going here was Devin Booker. I have no issue with him, Ant or Kyrie. They all look great, but they all look the same. Donovan Mitchell not that far away from them, and with no Evan Mobley, I mean, he's been crushing 50 plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games. His only bad game was against the Thunder. So nobody's going to give him a hard time for that. He's been absolutely on fire. So with the extra usage to go around, you could definitely argue he's way too cheap and not really that owned. 18% is not egregious. Jalen Green continues to project well. I don't love the matchup, though, and the price is high enough for me to not get super interested. Projection's fine. Just don't feel like I need to do that. Same with Amen Thompson. You can play them for sure. They will be nice GPP plays, just not priorities like they have been. They had been priorities for like a week. Like every time we saw them on the slate, we're like, okay, Jalen and Amen, they look great. But maybe not today. If we want to go down here in the mid-range, gets ugly in a hurry. Not seeing anything that I feel like I have to do. We can then talk about Nick Smith, the ultimate punt at 3.2K. He has been getting run, and he projects decently for 3.2. And that's probably what you can hope for. 24 to 27 fantasy points, but at 3.2K, I'm on board. Right now, he is a core play. Feels gross, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah. No Brandon Miller started the last couple games, I guess. He's been good per minute. He's pretty scoring dependent. So if things go awry on that front, he's probably not giving you much. And there's a pretty good chance he will completely ruin you at significant ownership. But it's very hard to get away from it as of now because he's 3-2. He's guard forward. So you can play him at the max number of spots. Just hard to avoid as of now. We'll see if more value opens up and he becomes less of a priority. But as of now, I'm not really getting away from it. Previously, you mentioned Green and Amen. I think Amen's the better play in the same range because you can play him at forward and he plays like 40 minutes a game. Green, for the first time in a while, I'm not really getting to today. Just the matchup sucks. He's a bit pricey, so not a priority. Kyrie, Mitchell, Booker, all great plays. Edwards, you can add to the pile. That's really it. Tyrese Martin is one that does stand out to me among the Brooklyn guys. Gets pretty good usage. Minute should be secure with 9 bodies available. Maybe in a blowout, he even gets a little bit of run. So among the Nets, Tyrese Martin is probably one of the more valuable ones.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's a bit more stable than Keon Johnson. I mean, Keon Johnson has had games where he started and then never came back again after the third quarter. So I feel like Tyrese is, and Tyrese is cheaper too. So I think also, by the way, the thing with Nick Smith, his usage rate has been pretty good. He's not afraid to let it fly. And the other thing is Memphis provides a pretty darn good DFS environment in general, a very fast-paced team. So, and he's 3.2K. Like
Memphis really gives it up to spot up shooters, and if that's what he's doing, then it's
exactly. So, I don't know. I don't think he's that risky, really. And even if the game blows out, pretty arguable. I mean, he's a former first-round pick. Pretty arguable they just let him run anyways, right? So there's that. So I think he looks pretty darn good. Cody Martin at 3.9K. He was popping earlier in the day. I think he's okay just because they are shorthanded a little bit. But I prefer Nick Smith for $700 cheaper by quite a bit. There is the OKC value, Dort and Case on Wallace. I mean, if you don't want to pay for SGA and you think the game's going to blow out, you could at least just get cheap exposure to this game and use these guys again. Dort probably isn't going to miss every single shot he takes for a second game in a row. And both these guys just are going to have a higher ceiling than usual against Utah. So I think OKC value plays are a bit interesting, especially, and maybe even if we don't catch it in time, but especially if Jalen Williams ends up being out. Like if we play for that, maybe, or if we play for that and just the matchup, I think that is an okay strategy.
Don't really love it. Just it's OKC, so I think there's enough other value. Like I'd rather play Nick Smith. I'd rather play this Brooklyn stuff than you can always play Dort and Kaysen, I guess, but I don't know, not very fun.
All right, anybody else down low that you are into playing tonight?
I think Grayson Allen's just worth a mention at guard forward. He'll look a lot better if Beal is out as well, just like Tyus Jones. But 4-2, they're playing Brooklyn. He's cheap. I think it's okay.
Yeah, 100%. I think he's viable regardless, but I would definitely prefer Beal to miss. All right, let's see here. On the small forward, Amen Thompson leads the way. This is the worst position on the board for sure. By a lot. So I agree with if you're going to pick between Amen and Jalen, he would be the pick, but I just don't think he's a priority either way. Lowry's been missing time. He's facing the Thunder. He doesn't project very well. No. So Tyrese Martin is the first guy that stands out there. Like you said, Jaden McDaniels is a pivot there. He looks good. I mean, he's been crushing, but he crushed last game. So Jaden McDaniels is very inconsistent and tends to be fairly scoring dependent, and his price has come up. So the nice thing is he's in a not terrible spot, but he also and he gets a lot of minutes, but he also is 5K now. So I just feel like McDaniels is probably a trap on this slate. Like if you're looking for low mid-range value and you're like, screw it, McDaniels, I think that might be a problem actually. But he's okay. I don't have a huge issue with him. Lazar Thompson, if he ever gets the minutes in a spot against the Hawks, he would look really good. I think he's viable at 4.3K if he starts. But I don't like that he doesn't really play as much as he should probably. You can look at this net. I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name, but the 4.1K. Yeah, you mentioned him the other day. I think he was okay. He got like 20 fantasy
he shot
points.
1 for 6 and he sucked ass. But tonight I do like him a little bit.
Yeah. So I mean, I actually like to target guys sometimes after they have a really dreadful shooting day because it's just they are a professional NBA player. Even if maybe he shouldn't be. But, the odds are in their favor that they will bounce back to some degree. So I did not mind him at 4.1K with them only having 9 bodies. Max Strus with no Evan Mobley, he's okay. Like right there, if you're looking at the Levert range, him and Levert look pretty good. Don't have a problem with that. Anybody else at small forward that calls to you, like obviously we're looking to save here overall.
Yeah, there's no one to pay for really except Amin Thompson. So Nick Smith, it's nice that you can play him here. Tyrese Martin, you can play him here. Iwoma, like we talked about. I think Dean Wade is one of the more valuable cheap Cavs just because he's a sub 4K starter. Pretty good punt, if you ask me. Josh Okogie's 3K, had a roll off the bench for Charlotte in the last game. I'm not super excited about sub 20-minute Josh Okogie off the bench, but he's 3K. Historically, he's pretty decent per minute. So if you want to get out of there paying the bare minimum at small forward, it's not the worst idea. George Niang, essentially the same play as Wade. I do slightly prefer Wade just because the minutes are more secure. Both are fine. Hardaway, Bogdanovich. There's a lot of bullshit at small forward. So Smith and Martin, I think, would be definitely the headliners for me.
Yeah, I think moral of the story is have a wide array of values at small forward that you feel good about, and then just use a bunch of them because you're just not paying for anybody here. There are a lot of worthwhile values here that on any slate they would be in play, and especially on this slate they're going to be in play. I think really what I'm going to do though is just put Nick Smith Jr. at small forward, and with shooting guard looking pretty strong up top, I may just go get Devin Booker there or Kyrie and approach it that way. So then ideally I'm not messing with more than one small forward too. Like I don't really want to have 2 punts from small forward on this slate if I don't have to. All right, over at power forward we go. Kevin Durant leads the way with a 48-point fantasy projection. Not a lot of ownership. I would assume if anybody's going to be owned on the Suns, it's probably going to be Booker. So KD looks possibly overlooked here. A little bit of true revenge against the Nets here. 9.3K is still a palatable price. He looks good. It does drop off a little bit because Jalen Williams is questionable. Looks good at 8.2K against the Jazz for sure. If we knew he was in, obviously he would be a better play compared to Durant. Jalen Johnson is there too. He came back. I think he played like 35 and 38 minutes after missing like 2 weeks with a shoulder issue. So if he's in, he should not be restricted. The Pistons are a fine matchup. He looks good. And then there's Miles Bridges, who I think you touched on before. You kind of were alluding to him. And he's almost like $1,000 cheaper than these guys, and it's kind of in a similar range. So if you look at the top 4 guys, I think Bridges kind of stands out as the better point per dollar option. So what do you think about those guys?
Don't love it in general. Like it's a much stronger position than small forward, but I'm not really on Bridges. I'm not really on Jalen Johnson, who's questionable tonight. Maybe more value opens up. I think KD and Jalen Williams are good plays. Jalen Williams at 8.2 is, fine enough, dealing with an injury. So not great and a potential blowout. So beware of that risk. Both KD and J-Dub have blowout risk, obviously. Otherwise, I'm probably going down. I think PJ Washington, 6'6", is kind of toward the high end for him, but the minutes are always there. No Luka, no Lively. Should be a fairly competitive game, I think, against Minnesota. The spread is like 4 points. So one of the better games to target, I think. And then once we go even cheaper, Tobias Harris, Naz Reid, and Tari Eason all look excellent in the sub 6K range. Reid and Tobias are going to be chalky. Tari Eason is not going to be chalky. I think Eason, dollar for dollar, is just as good as they are. The minutes came up in the last game, didn't play very well. They kind of got blown out by Detroit, but 5.4 for Eason, an elite per minute producer, is just pretty cheap. So I like that quite a bit as a way to get different. But Reed and Tobias are fine. Prefer Reed between the two. Tobias, much wider range of outcomes, even in the starting role. But I do like to pick on Atlanta, so Tobias is perfectly fine.
Yeah. I mean, the nice thing, the Pistons are kind of rolling out their guys at like 35 minutes a pop. Like even Tim Hardaway Jr., like we can feel pretty good about his minutes at 4K, and Tobias, same deal. So, and it's the Hawks, so I don't hate it at all. I like the Tari Easton call because people seem to be forgetting that Jabari Smith is not there. So Tari Eason does not have quite a restriction on his minutes like he normally would. So as he's ticking his minutes up, coming back from injury, who's to say he has to stay at 26 minutes, really? Also, there's the matchup with the Cavs, so that also could scare people away a little bit. I think Tari Eason looks like an awesome tournament play at the moment, especially with ownership going to Nas and Tobias. I love that call. So I really like Jalen Williams. The only issue is, will news come out in time? I don't know. I think if I'm going to pay here, it would be Jalen Williams. But if we don't get that information, I think Miles Bridges is a pretty good, fallback plan. I just think that game environment's really good for him, and no Brandon Miller. I think he's a pretty good play. KD also really good. If you just like, this game lacks like reliable studs. Like there's no Giannis or Jokic or Luka or anything like that. We're just looking at point guards who obviously, as we know, can kind of fluctuate. So KD pushing almost 50 fantasy points at 9.3K is certainly very tempting. All right, at center, we have Şengün leading the way with a 45-point fantasy projection. I do not see him as a necessary option with Mark Williams just ready to be a god for everybody. He's also in that same game with Memphis, obviously facing Edey. I don't know what that is going to look like, but Edey hasn't even been getting consistent run lately, so who knows what's going to happen there. But Mark Williams just looks so good. 7K, awesome projection. If you want to play Şengün at no ownership because of the presence of Mark, that's something to consider in GPPs for sure. Obviously, he'd be a good tourney play, but the matchup with the Cavs and Jared Allen is not great. So Mark Williams is my top play at center for sure. Jared Allen is a good value at 6.8K. Prefer him over anybody else up top here, probably. You can play Nas at forward, so don't think you have to play him at center. Onyeka, man, if he's going to consistently get the starting nod now, he looks awesome at 5.6K. The projection doesn't really blow you away, but the Pistons are not a bad matchup, and he's been crushing, so he looks good. My question for you, beyond what you think about those guys, would be, what are your thoughts on Gafford coming up to 6K? Dude has been a monster in 2 of his last 3 games, 71 fantasy points last game.
Yeah, he's perfectly fine. I don't know how much you need it because there are cheaper ones that look pretty comparable. Kind of feels like a chase with 70 fantasy points the other night and like 7 blocks or whatever, but he's fine. I just think you can save money with Kongwu, you can save money with Duren, you can save money with Gobert, Nick Richards. They're all like pretty similar plays. Jalen Williams, the other one for OKC, 5K, but maybe not expensive enough for the role he's been playing with Hartenstein out. So a lot of cheap stuff. I still think Gafford's certainly someone that should be in your pool, especially if he's not owned. But the matchup against Minnesota is not necessarily a great one for a guy like that. So he's okay. I do think Mark Williams is certainly a standout. Like 7K, we talked about the other day. He's expensive since we're not used to paying this much for Mark Williams over the years, but he's been unbelievable essentially since coming back from injury. I'm trying to not necessarily use his per minute rate for this season because it is so through the roof, but so you can argue I'm kind of under projecting him, and he's still projecting insanely well at 7K flat. So no issue with that. Allen's okay. I don't love the spot for them in general. Like I said, Duren at 5.5 feels a little bit undervalued. He's really come around since a slow start. We like to pick on Atlanta in general. Isaiah Stewart as the backup at 3.1 is okay if you're not playing him with Duren. Another punt on my radar would be Zach Edey. Like 3.9 is probably the cheapest he's been all season. Still starting. The minutes have been shaky, but I'm willing to buy low on a guy like this. We've seen ceiling out of him. If the minutes do come back around, he can easily smash a 3.9 salary. So that's another guy that would be in my pool for tournaments.
Yeah, you would. I mean, like you could certainly make the argument that they would need his size against Mark. But they certainly have needed his size against Rudy and Wemby, and that hasn't really been the case. Like, he hasn't been productive. He hasn't been getting consistent runs. So at 3.9K, I
You
agree.
don't really need, like, Rudy's not going to get buckets in the paint, really, like back to the basket type. And Wemby is a perimeter big, so that's kind of a rough spot for Edie, who's a bit sluggish on his feet, I would say.
Indeed.
Williams is more of a post type of big pick and roll stuff. So I think Edie, decent buy low here.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, on this other side of that, though, Mark Williams, by the way, it's not just that Mark Williams has been crushing. His usage rate has been really good. So no Brandon Miller still is probably playing a very large factor. The second Brandon Miller gets there and Mark Williams is super expensive, I might get off the train, but not tonight, my friend, not tonight. All right, that does it for our player-by-player breakdown. Before we wrap things up, let's look at our flag plant of the slate and our general strategy for tonight.
Yeah, there are a lot of ways to pay up. I think you don't really have to go too far off the board. I think I would flag plant Tari Eason as a low-owned value play. Cleveland does play fast, so a pace-up spot for Houston. They're good defensively, not quite as good without Evan Mobley, of course. So I think Eason, if he's going to be completely unowned, is someone that's pretty easy to get over the field on. If you want a more expensive conviction play, I would say Kyrie. The matchup against Minnesota is okay, not great, but tight spread, decent environment. I think he might go undervalued by the field.
Yeah, I think my conviction and strategy is inching towards not paying 10K for anybody on this slate. So, like, when Giannis was still on the slate, I was really interested in getting Giannis. But the more I look at it, whether it be blowout or whether it be, you know, a little bit more context added to the situation, like with somebody like LaMelo pushing 11K, like, what does he have to do to make you feel good about that, right? Like, it just doesn't feel very good. That game has a 12-point spread. I think Cade is probably as high as I'd really want to go. Like, SGA is the best projection. If you just want those raw 50 fantasy points, probably with a ceiling of pushing 70, SGA is the play. But I'm starting to like a build where maybe I can go get like 2 or 3 of these other really good guards instead of forcing an almost 11K player. So that would probably be the thing I am interested in the most. And also, he's chalky at this point, but Mark Williams, I don't think I can fade 7K Mark Williams given what he's projected at and given what he's been doing. All right, so that is going to do it for us. Hopefully this helps you out a little bit. If you need further assistance, you can join our Discord for free. Catch it in the link below this video. If anything we've done here helps you out, give this video a like and also subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching and good luck.